One sip. That was all it would have taken to end the reign of Chicago's most feared man. Julian Vance thought he was celebrating a victory, but the man pouring his drink was planning his funeral. In the underworld, loyalty is just a currency waiting to be devalued. But amidst the smoke and the lies, a girl with nothing to lose saw everything. She slid a napkin across the mahogany that changed history. Don't drink it. When Julian looked up, he didn't run. He smiled. And then, he took her with him. This is the story of how a bartender saved a king, and how the king burned the world down to keep her. The air inside the gilded cage always smelled of old money and new sins. It was a cocktail of imported Cuban cigar smoke, the metallic tang of chilled vodka, and the heavy, musky scent of oud wood cologne, worn by men who killed for a living. Cassidy Blair smoothed the front of her black vest, her knuckles white. She had been working the VIP lounge of Chicago's most exclusive underground club for 6 months. In that time, she had learned the 3 golden rules of survival in the Loop's underworld. See nothing, hear nothing, and never, ever make eye contact with Julian Vance. Tonight, she was about to break all 3. Julian Vance sat in the corner booth, a sprawling expanse of oxblood leather that looked more like a throne than a seat. He was wearing a midnight blue bespoke suit cut sharp enough to bleed on. Even from behind the bar, Cassidy could feel the gravity of his presence. He wasn't loud. Men like Julian didn't need volume to be heard. He just existed, and the room bent around him. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. The word on the street, whispered by the nervous busboys, was that Julian had just secured the union contracts for the Southside docks, effectively cutting out the rival Moretti family. "Cassidy, wake up," her manager, a nervous, sweating man named Elias, hissed as he passed by. "Mr. Vance wants the Louis XIII, the bottle from the private reserve." Cassidy nodded, her throat tight. "On it!" She moved to the high shelf, reaching for the crystal decanter that cost more than her father's life insurance payout. As she pulled it down, she glanced into the expansive mirror behind the bar. It was an antique, slightly smoked, giving the reflection of the room a ghostly quality. Through the glass, she saw the booth. Julian was laughing, a rare sight, head thrown back, exposing the sharp line of his throat. Beside him sat Adrian Thorne, his second in command. Adrian was handsome in a jagged, predatory way, with bleached blonde hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. Cassidy set the glasses on the bar top. She began to polish them, her eyes flicking back to the mirror. That was when she saw it. Adrian was leaning over the table to pour the cognac while Julian lit a cigarette. Adrian's hand moved with a magician's speed. A small, clear vial slipped from his cuff. A single drop, no larger than a tear, fell into the glass destined for Julian. The vial disappeared back into the sleeve. Adrian pushed the glass toward his boss, his face a mask of brotherly affection. Cassidy's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Ricin? Cyanide? Digitalis? Whatever it was a death sentence. If she did nothing, Julian Vance died tonight. If she spoke up, Adrian Thorne would kill her before she finished the sentence. Julian reached for the glass. "Do it," her mind screamed. "Look away." But Cassidy thought of her brother, locked away in a state penitentiary for a crime he didn't commit, framed by men just like Adrian. She thought of the injustice that greased the wheels of this city. She couldn't watch another murder. Not tonight. She grabbed a cocktail napkin. With a shaking hand, she uncapped her pen. She wrote 4 words, underscored by a jagged line. "Don't drink. Smile. Leave." She folded it tight. She walked out from behind the bar, the formidable bottle of Louis XIII in one hand, a pitcher of water in the other. Her legs felt like lead. She approached the table. The conversation stopped instantly. Julian's eyes, the color of cold steel, locked onto her. "Water for the table, sir?" Cassidy asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "We didn't order water," Adrian snapped, his eyes narrowing. He was eager for Julian to drink. "Get lost." "It's on the house," Cassidy said. As she set the water pitcher down, she deliberately knocked a bowl of mixed nuts over near Julian's hand. "Clumsy bitch," Adrian hissed. I am so sorry. Cassidy apologized, reaching down to sweep the nuts into her hand. As she did, she pressed the folded napkin directly into Julian's palm. Her skin brushed his. He was burning hot, radiating heat. She looked up, meeting his gaze. She pleaded with her eyes, a desperate, silent telegraph. "Read it." Julian paused. He felt the paper. He didn't look at it immediately. He looked at her. He saw the terror in her pupils, the sheen of sweat on her forehead, the way her pulse jumped in her neck. He looked at Adrian, who was watching the glass of cognac with the intensity of a starving wolf. Julian smiled. It was a terrifying, cold expression. He opened his hand beneath the table, glancing down for a fraction of a second. "Don't drink. Smile. Leave." Julian picked up the glass of cognac. Cassidy stopped breathing. Adrian leaned forward, his breath held. Julian swirled the amber liquid. "You know, Adrian," Julian said, his voice a low rumble. "We've been through hell together." "That we have, boss," Adrian said, licking his lips. "To the future." "To the future." Julian raised the glass. He brought it to his lips. Cassidy wanted to scream. Then Julian stopped. He set the glass down with a heavy clink. "But the future is uncertain," Julian said, "and I suddenly feel stifled." He stood up abruptly. The movement was so sudden that his bodyguards, stationed 10 feet away, snapped to attention. "Sir?" Adrian stood up, confusion marring his features. "The drink! It's a celebratory toast." "I'll take it to go," Julian said. He grabbed the bottle of Louis XIII. Then his hand shot out. He didn't grab his gun. He grabbed Cassidy's wrist. His grip was like an iron shackle. "And you," he said to her, "you're coming with me." "What?" Cassidy gasped. "I can't." "You made a mess," Julian said, his eyes hard, playing the role for the room. "You're going to help me clean it up." "Boss, let the girl go. She's just waitstaff," Adrian protested, stepping forward, his hand drifting toward his jacket pocket. Julian's other hand moved. A silver Sig Sauer P-226 appeared from nowhere, leveled directly at Adrian's chest. The music in the club died. The silence was deafening. "Don't follow me, Adrian," Julian said softly, "and don't drink my cognac. It might disagree with you." Julian yanked Cassidy toward the exit. "Move," he commanded. Cassidy stumbled, struggling to keep up with his long strides. They burst through the kitchen doors, past the startled chefs, and out into the biting wind of a Chicago winter alleyway. A matte black armored SUV was waiting. Julian shoved her into the back seat and climbed in after her. "Drive!" he barked at the driver. "Go dark. Pattern Delta." As the heavy door slammed shut, sealing them in the quiet luxury of the vehicle, Cassidy realized she hadn't just saved a life, she had just kidnapped herself. The interior of the SUV smelled of leather and gun oil. The city lights of Chicago blurred into streaks of neon gold and red as the driver, a massive man named Tobias, wove through the traffic on Wacker Drive with terrifying precision. Cassidy was pressed against the door, clutching her wrist where Julian had grabbed her. It throbbed. Julian Vance sat on the opposite side, the Sig Sauer still resting on his thigh, his finger off the trigger but ready. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching the rearview mirror, scanning for tails. "Clear," Tobias grunted from the front. Only then did Julian turn to her. The streetlights cast intermittent shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angle of his jaw and the scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "Who sent you?" he asked. His voice was calm, which made it infinitely more scary than if he had shouted. "No one," Cassidy stammered. Her adrenaline was crashing, leaving her shaking violently. "I work there. You know that. I've served you for 6 months." "Waitresses are easy to buy," Julian said. "How did you know?" "I saw him," she whispered. "In the mirror. The antique mirror behind the bar. The angle, he didn't think anyone could see. He slipped a vial from his cuff. Just a drop." Julian stared at her, analyzing her micro-expressions. He was a human lie detector, a man who had survived a decade at the top of the food chain by knowing when he was being played. He saw the genuine terror in her eyes. "Adrian," he muttered, looking out the window. My sister's husband. My right hand. He didn't sound surprised, merely disappointed. Ambition is a rot. He wanted you to drink it right then, Cassidy added. He was excited. Julian let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Ricin takes days. If it was immediate, it was likely a concentrated neurotoxin. I would have foamed at the mouth and died on the floor of my own club. Very theatrical. Very Adrian. He turned back to her. Why? Cassidy blinked. Why what? Why save me? Julian leaned forward, invading her personal space. The scent of him, expensive tobacco and cold air, was overwhelming. You know who I am. You know what I do. Most people in this city would pray for my death. Cassidy swallowed hard. My brother is in Stateville prison. Julian raised an eyebrow. Okay. He didn't do it. He was a driver for a heist he didn't know was happening. The crew that set him up, they worked for the Morettis. But the judge, the lawyers, no one cared. She looked him dead in the eye. I hate the game you play. I hate the violence. But I hate betrayal more. What that man did to you, smiling in your face while he poisoned you, it was cowardly. I couldn't watch it. Julian studied her for a long moment. What's your name? Cassidy. Cass. Well, Cass, you have a problem. I have a problem, she laughed hysterically. I'm in the back of a Mafia boss's car. Adrian saw you pass me the note, Julian explained calmly. He saw me stop. He's not stupid. He knows you tipped me off. If I had left you there, you would be dead within the hour. They would have tortured you to find out what you told me, and then they would have dissolved you in a barrel of acid in the meatpacking district. Cassidy felt the blood drain from her face. So, Julian continued, checking the magazine of his pistol, you are now under my protection, which means you are officially a target of the Thorn faction. Thorn faction? I thought he worked for you. He did, until tonight. Tonight, he declared a coup. Julian pulled out a burner phone and snapped it in half, tossing the pieces onto the floorboard. Tobias, take us to the lake house. The penthouse is compromised. Yes, sir. The car swerved onto the highway, accelerating to a speed that pressed Cassidy back into the leather seats. Where are we going? She asked, her voice trembling. Somewhere off the grid, Julian said. He reached into a cooler, built into the seat console, and pulled out a bottle of water, tossing it to her. Drink, you look like you're gonna pass out. Cassidy opened the water, her hands shaking so much she spilled a little on her vest. What are you gonna do to him? To Adrian? Julian looked out at the dark waters of Lake Michigan speeding by, his expression hardened into something carved from granite. I'm going to let him think he's won for about 24 hours. Julian said, let him get comfortable in my chair. Let him think I'm running scared. He looked back at Cassidy, and for the first time the hardness in his eyes softened, just a fraction. And then, Julian whispered, I'm going to take back my city. And you, Cassidy Blair, are going to help me. Me? I'm a bartender. Exactly, Julian nodded. You're invisible? No one looks at the help. And right now, invisible is the most dangerous thing you can be. The car slowed down, turning onto a secluded gravel road lined with towering pine trees. They approached a massive steel gate that opened automatically. The lake house wasn't a house. It was a fortress of glass and concrete perched on a cliff overlooking the freezing lake. As the car came to a halt, Julian turned to her one last time before opening the door. One rule, Cass, he said, his voice low and serious. Inside these walls, you listen to me. Outside these walls, they will kill you. Inside, I will kill for you. Do you understand? Cassidy looked at the man who terrified the entire city of Chicago. She saw the danger, yes, but she also saw a strange, rigid code of honor. He had saved her from the bar. He could have left her to die to save his own skin, but he dragged her out. I understand, she whispered. Good. Julian kicked the door open. Welcome to the war. The lake house was a monolith of brutalist architecture, a jagged scar of concrete and glass cutting into the cliffside of Lake Forest. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly impenetrable. Tobias pulled the SUV into a subterranean garage that looked more like a showroom. Rows of fluorescent lights flickered on, revealing a collection of vintage motorcycles and another armored sedan. "Upstairs," Julian commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Tobias, lock down the perimeter. Sensors on maximum sensitivity. If a squirrel crosses the property line, I want to know about it." "Understood, boss." Julian led Cassidy toward a steel elevator. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the unspoken reality of what had just happened. Cassidy watched him from the corner of her eye. He was still holding the bottle of Louis XIII. It was a surreal prop for a man who had just declared war. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling living area. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, looking out over the black, churning expanse of Lake Michigan. The room was furnished in stark whites and grays, devoid of personal touches. No photos, no clutter. It was the home of a man who didn't plan on leaving anything behind. Julian walked to a wet bar, sleek black marble, and set the bottle down. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he grabbed 2 tumblers. "You're going to drink it?" Cassidy asked, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "I'm going to pour it," Julian corrected. If Adrian poisoned the decanter, he would have had to do it before service started. But if he spiked the glass, the bottle is clean. He poured a splash into one glass and held it up to the light. He swirled it, watching the legs of the cognac drip down the crystal. Then, without hesitation, he downed it. Cassidy flinched. Julian closed his eyes, exhaling a long breath. He didn't die. He didn't foam at the mouth. He simply opened his eyes and poured a second glass. He slid it across the marble toward her. "Drink," he said. "You're shaking." Cassidy walked forward tentatively. She took the glass. Her hands were trembling so badly the liquid rippled. She took a sip. The burn was immediate, grounding her, chasing away the cold numbness of shock. "Why do you live like this?" she asked, looking around the barren room. "It looks like a museum." "Attachments are liabilities," Julian said, taking off his suit jacket and draping it over a stool. Beneath, he wore a white dress shirt, the top buttons undone, revealing a tattoo that peeked out from his collarbone, something Latin, jagged script. "Adrian used to tell me that I needed to settle down, find a wife, buy a dog." He laughed darkly. "Now I know he just wanted me distracted so he could put a bullet in my head." He turned to her, leaning his hips against the bar, crossing his arms. The intensity of his gaze made Cassidy feel like she was the only thing in the room. "Tell me about your brother," he said. Cassidy stiffened. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to trust you, I need to know where your loyalty lies. You hate men like me. You said so, yet you saved me. That's a contradiction. I don't like contradictions." Cassidy took another sip of the cognac, finding courage in the burn. "His name is Toby. He's 22. He's not like you. He's soft. He likes fixing cars and reading comic books. He took a driving job because our mom got sick and we needed cash fast. He didn't know they were robbing a jewelry exchange. When the cops came, the crew bailed. They left Toby in the van." She gripped the glass tighter. The prosecutor wanted a win. The public defender wanted a lunch break. They gave him 15 years. I've been working 3 jobs to pay for an appeal lawyer. That's why I was at the Gilded Cage. The tips were good. Julian listened, his face impassive. Who was the crew? "I don't know names. Just a nickname I heard Toby mention once." "The Vulture?" Julian's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of recognition. "Silas Vane. He runs a chop shop in Cicero. He's a low-level earner for the Moretti family." "You know him?" "I know everyone, Cass." Julian pushed off the bar and walked toward a massive wall of monitors hidden behind a sliding panel. He tapped a few keys, and the screens roared to life. Feeds from the club, the docks, and various street corners in Chicago popped up. "If you help me," Julian said, his back to her, "I will have your brother out of Stateville in a week." Cassidy froze. The glass nearly slipped from her hand. "That's impossible. We've been denied 2 appeals." Julian turned, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. "You're thinking like a civilian. You rely on the law." "I rely on leverage. The judge who sentenced your brother has a gambling debt in Vegas that I purchased 6 months ago. The district attorney has a mistress he keeps in a condo I own. If I make a phone call, Toby walks." Tears pricked Cassidy's eyes. Hope, sharp and painful, bloomed in her chest. "You'd do that, just for a note on a napkin?" "You saved my life," Julian said simply. "I pay my debts." But the price is high. Adrian has made his move. He hasn't just tried to kill me. He's trying to seize the network. He's cut my lines of communication. My lieutenants are likely being rounded up or bought off as we speak. I need to strike back, and I need to do it before sunrise. I need to get into the club's mainframe to drain the operating accounts before Adrian locks me out. "So do it," Cassidy said. "You have a computer right there." "It requires a biometric key," Julian said. "A physical key. It's in the safe in my office at the club. The office where Adrian is currently sitting, drinking my champagne and planning my eulogy." Cassidy felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. "You can't go back there. They'll kill you on sight." "I can't go back," Julian agreed. He looked at her. He looked at her waiter's vest, her messy bun, her nondescript appearance. "But you're just the help. In the chaos of a leadership change, staff is invisible. Adrian won't be looking for the girl he fired. He'll be looking for hit squads." "You want me to go back?" Cassidy whispered. "You said they'd kill me." "Not if you walk in the front door," Julian said, his voice dropping low, stepping closer to her. He reached out, his fingers grazing her chin, tilting her face up. The touch was electric. "I need someone to walk into the lion's den, retrieve the key, and walk out. I need someone brave enough to save a monster. And if I get caught?" "Then I burn the city to the ground to find you," Julian vowed. "But you won't get caught, because I'm going to teach you exactly what to do." The preparation took 2 hours. It was a crash course in corporate espionage delivered by a man who treated breaking and entering like a science. Julian moved with a restless energy, pacing the length of the safe-house living room. He had changed into a tactical turtleneck and dark cargo pants, stripping away the veneer of the businessman to reveal the soldier underneath. "The safe is bio-coded to my thumbprint," Julian explained, sketching a layout of the office on a glass whiteboard. "But there's a bypass, a manual override key. I keep it taped under the bottom drawer of the mahogany desk. It's old school. Adrian thinks I'm all digital. He won't look for a physical key." Cassidy sat on the edge of the leather sofa, memorizing the layout. She had changed out of her uniform into clothes Julian had provided from a supply closet. Black jeans, a black hoodie, and sneakers. She looked like a shadow. "The club is closed now," Cassidy said, checking the clock. It was 3 a.m. "Cleaning crew will be in." "Exactly." "And the night shift security. Most of them are loyal to the paycheck, not the man. But Adrian will have his personal guard, the ghosts, stationed at the office door." "So how do I get in?" "The ventilation system is too small. The back door is alarmed," Julian said. He stopped pacing. "You're going to walk in, delivering the laundry." "The laundry?" "Every Tuesday at 3:30 a.m., a van arrives to take the linens. The driver is a man named Sal. He owes me. Tobias is contacting him now. You're going to be his new assistant." Cassidy took a deep breath. This was insanity. 3 hours ago, her biggest worry was getting a good tip on a bottle of Grey Goose. Now, she was planning a heist on the most dangerous building in Chicago. But the image of her brother, sitting in a gray cell, pushed away the fear. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." The ride back to the city was silent. Tobias drove a nondescript plumbing van this time. They parked 3 blocks away from the Gilded Cage in a dark alley behind a commercial laundry service. Sal was waiting. He was a small, nervous man who jumped when Julian stepped out of the shadows. "Mr. Vance," Sal squeaked. "I heard rumors. They said you were dead." "Disappointed?" Julian asked, his voice like grinding stones. No, sir. Never." "Good. This is your new trainee," Julian gestured to Cassidy. "She goes in, with the cart. She comes out with the cart. If she doesn't come out, Sal, well, you know I have a very long reach." Sal swallowed hard and nodded at Cassidy. "Get in the van, kid." Julian grabbed Cassidy's arm before she could step away. He pressed a small earpiece into her palm. "Put this in. I'll be with you every step. If things go south, drop to the floor and cover your head. I have Tobias on a rooftop across the street with a rifle. He'll make an exit for you." Cassidy looked up at him. The harsh alley lights cast deep shadows over his face, making him look demonic and beautiful all at once. "Trust me," he whispered. "I do," she said, and she realized with a start that she meant it. She climbed into Sal's laundry van. 10 minutes later, they were pulling up to the service entrance of the Gilded Cage. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She pulled a baseball cap low over her eyes and grabbed a canvas laundry cart. "Easy, kid," Sal muttered. "Just look bored. Nobody looks at the laundry guy." They buzzed the door. A heavy-set bouncer named Rocco opened it. Cassidy knew him. He usually checked IDs at the front. He looked tired. "Late tonight, Sal?" Rocco grunted. "Traffic," Sal lied smoothly. "New girl is slow." Rocco glanced at Cassidy. She kept her head down, chewing gum loudly, feigning indifference. "Whatever, in and out. Boss is upstairs in a mood." Boss. Adrian was already making himself at home. Cassidy pushed the cart into the familiar hallway. The club smelled different, with the lights on stale beer and cleaning chemicals. "Turn left." Julian's voice crackled in her ear. It was clear, calm, and reassuring inside her head. "Service elevator to the 3rd floor. That's the executive level." "I have to get linens from the VIP lounge first," Cassidy whispered, pretending to talk to herself. "Do it fast," Julian commanded. She moved through the club, tossing dirty tablecloths into the cart to maintain cover. She reached the service elevator and pressed the button. Ding! The doors opened on the 3rd floor. The hallway was plush, carpeted in deep red. At the end of the hall was the double mahogany door of Julian's office. 2 men in suits stood outside. Not regular security. These were Adrian's men, the ghosts. They wore earpieces and looked alert. "Stop!" Julian's voice barked in her ear. "Don't approach them. They won't let laundry through." "What do I do?" Cassidy breathed. "Fire alarm," Julian said. "There's a pull station 10 feet behind you, near the ecstatic dance floor entrance. Pull it." Cassidy backtracked. She found the red lever. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then yanked it down. WHEEP. Weep, weep! The strobe lights began to flash. The shrieking alarm was deafening. Down the hall, the 2 guards looked at each other. "Check it out," one yelled. "I'll stay on the door." Only one left. That wasn't enough. "Damn it," Julian hissed in her ear. "Plan B. You have the stun gun I gave you?" Cassidy felt the weight of the small device in her hoodie pocket. "Yes." "You're gonna have to sell it, Cass. Walk up to him. Play the dumb, panicked girl." Cassidy took a deep breath. She pushed the cart frantically down the hall toward the remaining guard. "Hey, you!" the guard shouted, hand going to his holster. "This is a restricted area." "I'm sorry," Cassidy screamed over the alarm, playing up the hysteria. "I got lost. The alarm went off and the elevator won't open. I don't want to burn." She rushed toward him, eyes wide with fake terror. The guard, a hulking man with a shaved head, hesitated. He saw a terrified cleaning girl, not a threat. "Calm down, sweetheart. It's probably a drill. Get back to the—" Cassidy crashed the laundry cart into his shins. As he stumbled forward, cursing, she lunged. She jammed the stun gun into the side of his neck and pulled the trigger. The guard convulsed, his eyes rolling back, and he crumpled to the lush carpet like a sack of cement. "Nice," Julian said. There was a smile in his voice. "Now, the office. Fast." Cassidy stepped over the unconscious body and tried the door. Locked. "Kick plate," Julian directed. "Slide it up." She crouched, jamming her fingernails under the brass kick plate at the bottom of the door. It slid up an inch, revealing a keyhole. She pulled a tension wrench from her pocket, another gift from Julian, and twisted. The lock clicked. She pushed the door open and slipped inside. The office was dark, lit only by the flashing strobe of the fire alarm outside the window. It smelled of Julian, that rich oud wood scent, but beneath it, the acrid smell of Adrian's cheap cigarettes. "Desk," Julian guided. "Bottom drawer." Cassidy ran to the massive desk. She dropped to her knees, feeling blindly underneath. Her fingers brushed wood, dust, and then the slick feel of duct tape. She ripped it loose. A small brass key fell into her hand. "Got it," she whispered. "Good girl," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. "Now get out. The fire department will be there in 3 minutes. Use the confusion to blend in with the exiting staff." Cassidy stood up to leave. She turned toward the door. Then the lights flickered on. The fire alarm cut out abruptly, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Cassidy froze. The high-backed leather chair behind the desk, Julian's chair, swiveled around. Adrian Thorne was sitting there. He was holding a glass of whiskey in one hand and a silenced pistol in the other. He smiled, but his eyes were dead. "Hello, Cassidy," Adrian said smoothly. "I was wondering when Julian would send his little pet back to fetch his bone." Cassidy's blood turned to ice. She touched her ear, but all she heard was static. "Oh, don't bother with the earpiece," Adrian said, waving the gun lazily. "I engaged the signal jammers the moment the alarm went off. Amateur move, really." Julian is losing his touch. He stood up, walking around the desk. He loomed over her, smelling of betrayal and booze. "Give me the key," he said, extending a hand. Cassidy clutched the key in her fist. Her mind raced. Julian was outside. Tobias was on the roof. But in here, she was alone. "No," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Adrian laughed. He struck her, a brutal backhand across the face that sent her sprawling onto the floor. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. "That wasn't a request," Adrian spat, pointing the gun at her head. "Give me the key, or I'll repaint Julian's office with your brains." Cassidy looked up at him. Her cheek throbbed. She thought of the note she wrote, "Don't drink." She thought of Julian's hand on her wrist. "You're coming with me." She slowly opened her hand, revealing the brass key. Adrian smirked. "Smart girl." He reached down to take it. Cassidy didn't hand it to him. Instead, she threw it. She chucked the small brass key across the room, toward the open window, where the winter wind was howling. "Oops," she said, wiping blood from her lip. Adrian roared in fury. He turned his head instinctively to track the key. It was the only second Cassidy needed. She didn't run for the door. She didn't run for the window. She grabbed the heavy crystal decanter from the side table, the same one she had polished 1,000 times, and swung it with every ounce of rage she possessed. It connected with the back of Adrian's head with a sickening crunch. Adrian collapsed forward, hitting the desk before sliding to the floor, unconscious. Cassidy stood there, chest heaving, the shattered remains of the decanter in her hand. She scrambled to the window. The key was gone, lost in the alley below. But she was alive. She looked at Adrian's prone form. She saw his phone on the desk. It was unlocked, displaying a bank transfer screen. She didn't need the key anymore. The session was active. She grabbed the mouse. "Julian!" She screamed into the dead earpiece, hoping the signal would clear near the window. I'm in the computer!" Static. Then a voice. Urgent. Panicked. "Cass? Get out of there! Tobias says more cars are pulling up." "I have the transfer screen," she yelled, typing furiously. "Where do I send the money?" "What?" Julian sounded stunned. "Forget the money. Get out!" "Tell me the account number, Julian, or I send it all to the Red Cross." She heard Julian laugh, a short, disbelief-filled sound. He rattled off a string of numbers. Cassidy typed them in. "Transfer all funds. Enter." The screen flashed green. Transaction complete. Zero balance. She looked down at Adrian. He groaned, shifting on the floor. He was waking up. Cassidy grabbed the stun gun from her pocket and zapped him in the neck again, just for good measure. "That's for the tip," she muttered. She ran for the door, just as the sound of heavy boots thundered down the hallway. The hallway of the Gilded Cage was no longer a place of luxury. It was a kill box. Cassidy burst out of Julian's office, her sneakers squeaking violently against the polished marble floor. The fire alarm had been cut, leaving an eerie, ringing silence that was quickly broken by the heavy thud of footsteps storming up the main staircase. "Stairs!" Julian's voice barked in her ear. The signal was back, clear and urgent. "Don't take the elevator, they'll cut the cables." Cassidy didn't argue. She sprinted toward the emergency exit at the end of the hall, her lungs burning. She slammed into the crash bar, throwing the heavy steel door open. The stairwell was cold, smelling of concrete and damp dust. She heard shouting from the floor she had just left. "She's in the stairwell! Seal the exits!" Cassidy didn't run down, she slid. Gripping the railing, she vaulted down half a flight at a time, her movements fueled by pure, unadulterated terror. She had just stunned a man, knocked out a mob boss with a crystal decanter, and stolen $50 million. There was no going back to pouring gin and tonics after this. She reached the ground floor just as the door above her slammed open. Bullets ricocheted off the concrete walls, sparking orange and white in the dim light. Ping! Ping! Crack! Move, Cass! Move! Julian roared in her ear. She burst out into the alleyway. The cold winter air hit her sweat-drenched skin like a physical blow. The plumbing van was screeching around the corner, its side door already sliding open. Tobias was driving now, his face a mask of grim determination. Julian was leaning out of the side door, the Sig Sauer in his hand, barking fire. 2 black SUVs were blocking the end of the alley. Men in tactical gear were advancing. "Jump!" Julian commanded as the van slowed but didn't stop. Cassidy didn't think. She threw herself toward the moving vehicle. Julian's arm hooked around her waist, hauling her inside with bruising force. She tumbled onto the metal floor, scraping her knees, just as the rear window of the van shattered into 1,000 diamonds of safety glass. "Go! Go! Go!" Julian yelled, slamming the sliding door shut. Tobias punched the accelerator. The heavy plumbing van, surprisingly modified with a V8 engine, roared like a wounded beast. He didn't aim for the gap between the SUVs. He aimed for the SUV on the left. Crunch. Metal screamed as the van clipped the blockade, spinning the SUV out of the way. They shot out onto the main street, weaving through the late-night traffic of downtown Chicago. "Are you hit?" Julian was instantly over her, his hands checking her arms, her torso, his eyes wide with a panic she hadn't seen before. "I'm fine," Cassidy gasped, pushing hair out of her face. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. "I hit him. Adrian. I hit him with a bottle." Julian froze. A slow, dark smile spread across his face. It was terrifyingly attractive. "You knocked him out?" "He was going to shoot me. I transferred the money. It's all gone. Zero balance." Julian let out a laugh, a loud, incredulous sound that seemed to startle even Tobias in the front seat. "You bankrupted him. You actually did it." "Boss, we got company," Tobias interrupted. Cassidy scrambled to look out the back window. 3 black sedans were weaving through traffic behind them, ignoring red lights. "Lower whacker," Julian ordered. "Take it underground." Tobias swerved hard to the right, tires smoking, and plunged the van down the ramp into the subterranean bowels of Chicago. Lower Wacker Drive was a legendary labyrinth of pillars and shadows, a place where GPS signals went to die, and street racers reigned supreme. The chase intensified. The pursuing cars were faster, closing the gap. "Cassidy, get down," Julian said, his voice dropping to that deadly calm tone. He moved to the back doors of the van. He kicked them open. The wind roared into the cabin. The asphalt rushed by at 80 miles per hour, a blur of gray. Julian braced himself against the doorframe. He raised his weapon. He didn't fire wildly. He waited. He breathed. The lead sedan surged forward, trying to ram their bumper. Bang. Bang. 2 shots. Both tires on the sedan's front passenger side blew out instantly. The car violently jerked to the right, slamming into a concrete pillar with a bone-jarring impact. It spun across the lanes, blocking the second car. Julian pulled the doors shut and locked them. He turned back to Cassidy, his eyes blazing with adrenaline. "That bought us 2 minutes," Julian said. "Tobias, ditch the van at the marina. We switch to the boat." "The boat?" Cassidy asked, her voice high. "It's freezing outside." It's not for a cruise, Cass. It's for a disappearances act. They screeched into the desolate parking lot of the Burnham Harbor. The Winter Lake was a black void, the wind howling off the water with a bite that went straight to the bone. They abandoned the van, leaving the engine running. Julian grabbed a duffel bag from under the seat. He grabbed Cassidy's hand. Not her wrist this time, but her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. "Run," he said. They sprinted down the icy dock. The wind whipped Cassidy's hair into her face, blinding her. They reached a sleek, 60-foot yacht named the Obsidian. Tobias untied the moorings in seconds, while Julian punched a code into the keypad. They jumped onto the deck just as headlights swept across the parking lot they had just left. The engines of the yacht rumbled to life, a deep, throaty purr that vibrated through the deck. Tobias took the wheel, gunning the throttle. The boat surged forward, cutting through the icy chop of Lake Michigan, disappearing into the ink-black darkness just as the brake lights of the pursuing cars flared red on the shore. They were safe. For now. Cassidy collapsed onto a cushioned bench on the stern, her adrenaline crashing. She pulled her knees to her chest, shivering violently. Julian appeared with a thick wool blanket. He wrapped it around her, tucking the corners in tight. He sat down next to her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. "You did good," he said quietly. "I committed grand larceny," Cassidy whispered, staring at the receding lights of the city. "And assault. And I'm pretty sure I'm an accessory to whatever that shooting was." "You survived," Julian corrected. He reached out and touched her cheek. His thumb brushed over the bruise forming where Adrian had struck her. His expression darkened, the warmth vanishing instantly. "He touched you." "I'm fine," she said, leaning slightly into his hand despite herself. "He slapped me. I hit him with a bottle. I think I won the round." "He will pay for that," Julian vowed, his voice low and vibrating with a promise of violence that made Cassidy shiver more than the cold. "No one touches what is mine." Cassidy's breath hitched. "Yours?" Julian looked at her. The air between them was charged, electric with the danger they had just shared. He didn't pull away. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "You saved my life twice in one night, Cassidy," he murmured. "That makes you family. And in my world, family is the only thing we bleed for." Cassidy closed her eyes, exhausted, terrified, and confusingly, feeling safer than she had in her entire life. She was on a boat with a killer, fleeing a crime scene, and yet, wrapped in his blanket, she felt like she had finally come home. "Go below deck," Julian said softly, pulling back. "There's a medical kit and hot water. Clean up. The war isn't over yet." The cabin of the Obsidian smelled of sea salt and expensive polish. Cassidy stood in the bathroom, washing the blood from her split lip, while Julian worked furiously at the laptop in the main cabin. "The money is secure," Julian said as she emerged. $52 million. Adrian is broke." But his face wasn't triumphant. It was pale. He was staring at a digital transfer log on the screen. "Valkyrie Holdings," he whispered. "The authorization signature. It's an orchid." "So?" Cassidy asked. "It's my wife's symbol. Victoria. She died 5 years ago in a car bombing in Palermo." Julian looked up, his expression haunting. "Or so I thought. She faked it. She's been the one funding Adrian all along. She's been waiting." Suddenly, the boat's engines cut to a low idle. The silence was deafening. "Tobias?" Julian called out. No answer. He drew his gun, motioning for Cassidy to hide behind the kitchen counter. But as he approached the stairs, a woman's voice floated down, smooth, cultured, and chilling. "Drop it, Julian." Victoria Vance descended into the cabin. She was breathtaking and terrifying, wearing a white trench coat and holding a silver pistol. "Tobias is sleeping," she said dismissively. "I drugged his thermos before you left the safe house. I've been steering the boat for the last 20 minutes. "Why?" Julian demanded, shielding Cassidy with his body. "Why destroy everything we built?" "Because you were going soft," Victoria spat. "I heard the rumors. You were trying to go legitimate. Turn the empire into a real estate firm. I didn't marry a realtor, Julian. I married a king. If you won't rule, I will." She raised the gun, aiming it at Julian's heart. "Give me the laptop, and give me the girl. She knows too much." "No," Julian said, stepping firmly into the line of fire. "The money is locked in a trust that requires my fingerprint and yours. Kill me, and it's gone forever. And you're not touching Cassidy. She's loyal, something you never were." Victoria's finger tightened on the trigger. "Then I'll take half the money and leave you to rot." But before she could fire, the cabin was flooded with blinding white light. The boat rocked violently as a megaphone boomed from the darkness outside. "This is the U.S. Coast Guard. Cut your engines and exit with your hands up." Victoria's face twisted in rage. "You called them?" "Mutually assured destruction, darling," Julian smirked. "I triggered the distress beacon 10 minutes ago. If I can't have the city, neither can you." Realizing she was trapped, Victoria screamed, "I'll burn it all down." She turned and sprinted up the stairs, diving off the stern into the freezing black waters of Lake Michigan. She vanished instantly beneath the churning waves. Armed officers boarded the yacht. Julian grabbed Cassidy's shoulders, his eyes burning into hers. "Listen to me," he commanded urgently. "You are a hostage. I kidnapped you. You saw nothing. Stick to that story, and you walk away clean." "They'll arrest you!" Cassidy cried, gripping his arms. "Let them," Julian said calmly as the officers slammed him against the wall to cuff him. "Prison is just a building. I can handle it. I can't handle you getting hurt." As he was dragged away, he looked back one last time. "Don't drink the water," he whispered, a final callback to the note that started it all. "And wait for me." Cassidy stood alone on the deck, shivering in the biting wind. She wasn't just a bartender anymore. She was a survivor. And as she watched the flashing blue lights of the police boats, she knew one thing for certain. She was going to get him out. 6 months later, the air in the Cook County Correctional Facility smelled of bleach and despair. Julian Vance sat behind the thick plexiglass, wearing an orange jumpsuit with terrifying grace. "You're late," Julian said into the receiver. "I was filing motions," Cassidy replied. She had traded her bartender's vest for a tailored blazer, looking less like a victim and more like a weapon. "It's a slaughter, Cass," Julian warned. "The district attorney is pushing for the death penalty, and tomorrow Victoria testifies. She's going to play the victim and bury me." "She thinks she's untouchable because she bought the DA," Cassidy said, leaning closer. "But she made a mistake. She underestimated the help." Cassidy pressed a single sheet of paper against the glass. It was a digital ledger she and Tobias had spent months unearthing. "I found the Valkyrie accounts," Cassidy whispered. "The IP addresses don't track to Italy. They track to a penthouse in Chicago. And the payouts go directly to D.A. Holloway and Judge Reeves." Julian's eyes widened. "You have the smoking gun, but the police are on her payroll." "I know," Cassidy smiled, a dangerous expression she had learned from him. "That's why I'm not giving it to the police. I'm giving it to the court." "I remember your note, Julian. Smile and leave. We're done leaving. It's time to make them choke on the drink." The courtroom was a circus. Victoria Vance took the stand, dressed in innocent white, weeping as she spun a tapestry of lies about escaping Julian's abusive empire. The jury was eating it up. When the defense attorney, Marcus Sterling, stood up, he didn't ask questions. He attacked. "Mrs. Vance." Sterling boomed, projecting a digital log onto the court screens. "If you were destitute in Europe, why did your biometric signature authorize a $5 million transfer to the judge's private account last week?" The courtroom erupted. Victoria's tears vanished instantly. Her mask shattered, revealing the viper underneath. She locked eyes with Cassidy at the defense table. "You," Victoria hissed. "You little rat." Cassidy stood up, her voice ringing clear. "The money doesn't lie, Victoria. You didn't fake your death to escape. You faked it to take the crown. You're the boss." "Arrest her," Victoria shrieked. But the back doors burst open. "Federal agents! Nobody move!" Cassidy had gone nuclear. She hadn't just relied on the state court. She had sent the files to the FBI. Agents swarmed the room, handcuffing the corrupt judge, and the DA Victoria tried to run, hurling a water pitcher at a marshal, but was tackled to the floor, screaming in rage. Amidst the chaos, Julian stood calm in the eye of the storm. He looked at Cassidy with awe. She had broken every rule of the underworld to save him. 2 weeks later, the snow had melted in Chicago. The gilded cage reopened under new management. Cassidy stood behind the bar, pouring a glass of Louis XIII. The jazz was low, the lights dim. Julian walked in, a free man, the charges dropped with prejudice. He approached the bar, looking at her with an intensity that burned. "You are on the wrong side of the bar," he teased. "I like the view," she replied. "I can see the trouble coming." Julian laughed, taking the glass. "To loyalty." "To the twist," Cassidy corrected. They drank. Julian set the glass down and reached across the mahogany, capturing her hand. He kissed her wrist, right over her pulse. "Rule number 1 of the new management," Cassidy whispered. "No more notes. If you love me, say it to my face." "I love you," Julian said, the words heavy and real. "I know." He pulled her out from behind the bar. This time, she didn't stumble. She walked beside him, step for step, out of the cage and into the world they now owned together. And that is why you always pay attention to the bartender. Cassidy didn't just save a life. She rewrote the entire game. From a terrified waitress to the Queen of Chicago, she proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's the courage to use the truth. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of betrayal and justice, please smash that like button and subscribe for more stories. What would you have done in Cassidy's shoes? Let me know in the comments below.